All right, everybody, and welcome to Aegis and Cheese. I believe this is the 4th episode. We're going straight through the qualifiers onto another week of qualifiers. This week we've got SEA and North America. I am 4Beats, joined by my co-host Benji. And this special guest this week is going to be MLP Phoenix. Or Mike Lee Phoenix, MLP Dota. And we're going to start by talking about SEA, which is a region MLP I'm sure you're very excited to watch and see how this shakes out.
Very excited.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, very exciting. Hell of a lot going on. It's going to be a very close matchup between all these teams, I think. So I am very, very excited indeed.
Yeah, I kind of just to lay the groundwork here, just to jump right in. One of the reasons I think Southeast Asia is so exciting that people who may not have watched the region so much would know is you have two teams coming from the lower division in Team SMG and Motivate Trust Gaming. When you look at the players on these teams are teams that had to come through the open qualifiers to get in. They did not participate in Season 1. You look at Team SMG, you got Midone, Mu, KP, Afu, and how do you pronounce their 5? Raji, yeah. And then Motivate Trust, who came through the came through the open qualifiers and didn't drop a single game. We're the only team that took a game off of Team SMG, which is, I wouldn't call it a super team, but it certainly has some big names on it. And then on top of that, you have an upper division that is stacked with teams with I think the most DPC points for teams that haven't qualified between Neon, Fnatic, and TNC Predator. So it's really, it could be a bloodbath. And I guess we'll hop right into it with how the upper bracket's looking. If you had to give a top 3 based on this upper bracket, who do you really got right now?
Top 3, it'd be TNC Predator, Fnatic, and Motivate Trust. It's very hard to pick. Let me tell you, it's very, very hard to pick because on any given day, any of these teams could beat each other, and they've done it many times. But yeah, TNC, Fnatic, Motivate Trust, I'd say are my top 3. But it's really hard to choose. It really is.
It seems to be that everyone's really high on Motivate Trust right now. Pretty much everyone I've talked to has them. Maybe just as like they're the hopeful, they're the new hopeful, or maybe they really think that they have what it takes. But that really seems to be the team everyone is vying for right now.
I can kind of explain the backstory a little bit as to why that's happening. So about a year ago, this team showed up out of nowhere. And they started winning absolutely everything. They just beat every team and came first in every tournament in Southeast Asia. And then they got split up. Their position 1 and position 3 player, both respectively went to Fnatic and T1. So they were kind of poached off Motivate Trust Gaming. And they didn't really work out there. So neither player really performed really well in those teams. And so they kind of got kicked. And now they're back together as a squad. And as soon as they came back, they just started winning every C tournament again. So when this squad's together, before the DPC came around and even after it, they just win everything. Without a doubt, you can almost guarantee they'll come first. So although they're kind of no-names compared to big organizations like TNC and Fnatic, they just tend to win everything. So you can't really underestimate them. And you probably would have seen, but even I predicted Motivate would take out these qualifiers and qualify to TI. They are pretty insane.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus from everybody that I've talked to so far. But I just want to point out they do not have an easy road. They based on what everyone said, I'm not counting them out, but their road is to go up against Neon, who lost out at the Singapore Major to Team Secret of all teams. They had one of the toughest bracket runs, I think, in that event. and did pretty respectably. And then they have to go up against Fnatic, who is kind of the C powerhouse, I would say. The organization, the team, no matter what form they're in, this is kind of always around. And before we go too far away from it, Benji, we didn't get to ask you. If you had to give a top three, are yours pretty much the same here?
Well, I think I'll defer to MLP on the SEA, being the SEA expert amongst us. But no, as you said, this qualifier, just looking at all the teams, I think there are, and you can't say this for any other qualifier, right? You look at maybe 8 teams that have a pretty good shot of winning it. That's probably TNT, Neon, Fnatic, Execration, Boom, Omega, Motivate Trust, and SMG. As I see, teams that have a legitimate shot of winning that are all in the upper bracket. So I think I'm incredibly excited to watch the SEA qualifiers, but I think it's just so hard to pick the team that is gonna win. I think it's gonna be so much down to how your team performs on the day because you've got these 8 teams that are incredibly strong. After the first set of matches, 4 of them are going to be going down into the lower bracket, and you said it was going to be a bloodbath. I think that's 100% true. I really couldn't really give you a top three. I don't think. I think a lot of these teams are just so even, in any of the teams could beat any of them on any given day.
Yeah, I think that. I have an interesting question here. Because you've both mentioned that C is a region where any given team can beat any other team on any given day. How reflective do you think last season's DPC standings were to this region as a whole? Because it's you have a Neon, who is a team who made a pretty good run in Singapore and then bowed out in DPC season 2. So was that just another example of that, or did this team kind of lose some of their did they lose some of their ability going into the second season?
In my opinion, it's not so much that they lost their ability or anything like that. It truly is just a matter of that's how kind of competitive these teams are against each other. Like it really it does just change from tournament to tournament. Like it's always been like that. Like one team will look amazing. Like TNC will win one tournament, and then a week later you have another big tournament, and then they'll end up not even coming top six. Like it won't even, like it's kind of ridiculous how it's not like they fall off. It's just that every other team catches up within those couple weeks. And I think in Southeast Asia, the rivalries between the teams are quite big. A lot of the teams, they don't hate each other, but they really don't want to lose to each other. Like really don't want to lose. And it's I think it's a bit about that. Like no team wants to lose to the other team. Not purely just based off the fact that it's this organization versus that organization, but even the countries the teams originate from, they don't particularly like losing against each other. Like the Filipinos, for example, they may not like losing against the Indonesian teams, and it kind of goes like that. Like any teams that are from different countries, they tend to go at it extra hard. That's just how it rolls around here. Yeah, it's kind of crazy like that, but it does kind of show you how competitive the region can be as a whole.
Well, with the upper bracket being as it's going to be as close as it is, as everyone is saying. I guess the better question might be if you had to pick a team that you think will bow out in the upper bracket early, or maybe one that you don't think has a shot, which team would it be?
And that's a pretty hard one. I think I think the pick that might upset people is probably going to be SMG. I know everyone's looking at SMG and thinking they're very stacked, and that is true. They are extremely stacked as a team, but I think they might be the ones that get knocked out very fast. And it could work either way. TNC could also get knocked out naturally, but I don't know. SMG last season around, they didn't look amazing. They weren't gelling very well. I know they're big players, but it's a team game, and the last time I saw them, they didn't look like a cohesive unit. So I'm a little bit worried about SMG. I've got to be honest. Going into that first round.
SMG are my pick to win it, but as you said, they haven't looked great as of late. Didn't they? Correct me if I'm wrong. They bowed out against Lil Gun in the BTS Pro Series, first round of the playoffs.
Yep.
Which I guess is a good jumping off point to kind of look at the lower bracket. Is Lil Gun? Are they the team in the lower bracket? Are these the boys that are going to do it?
The lower bracket, I don't know if I'd say Lil Gun, but they certainly have a chance. Personally, if I was to pick, I'd probably say my best pick is Galaxy Racer. A lot of them or Army Geniuses, like can go either way, but both those teams are pretty darn powerful in their own right. Army Geniuses they're the only team that you'll see take games off Motivate Trust in other tournaments. I don't know why, but they've got their number for some reason. So it's either GXR or Army Geniuses, but I dare say GXR are probably just more favorited than Army Geniuses going into it from the lower bracket.
Army Geniuses, did they take a game? Were they the team that took a game off of Motivate Trust in season 2? I'm actually gonna look real quick.
I think they were. I can't remember exactly now. I'm trying to think back, but there was another tournament that Motivate and Army Geniuses ended up going against in the grand finals, and Army Geniuses ended up coming out on top. And every time we've seen the matchup between these two teams, it's always very, very close. And you wouldn't really expect it because Army Geniuses don't tend to do amazing overall in terms of results. But when they go up against Motivate, I don't know what happens with them, but they get, there's a fire in them that wants to just win. And it usually turns out to be a very exciting matchup between the two.
Yeah, it was Motivate Trust and it was Galaxy Racer. Both teams were able to take a game off of. Army Geniuses and Galaxy Racer were both able to take a game off of Motivate Trust, which it makes it just adds more hype to an already hype situation here. Another benefit of that is that you have both the teams you mentioned won't have to go up against each other in the lower bracket for a while. They do not meet for a while. But based on what you said, is there a team that you think that could just take out? Do you think 496 or possibly another team in this lower bracket could take out Army Geniuses?
Yeah, 496 could easily do it. These guys are crazy. They have a player that's played like 4,000 games of Wind Ranger and like 2,000 games of Techies. This team's crazy. They draft really weird. They switch up positions all the time. So you'll see the support player might start playing position 1, depending on what pick they want to make. They'll constantly run Techies if they think it's strong. And let me tell you, if they pick the Techies, it looks very scary for the other team. So they're a very weird team, this 496 side. Largely a Vietnamese stack, but I believe there's Drew's Indonesian, and I think Hustler's from Mongolia. So they could take anyone out as well. It just depends on how hot they're feeling this tournament. And I think during the qualifiers, they might get hot, but I wouldn't pick them as my favorites by any stretch. I'd still say the other two are much more favored, and there's going to be a high chance that Army Geniuses just knocks them out first round. But yeah, they could make a run. You never know with these guys.
And I would this is just a question based on my own ignorance here, but Signal Ultra versus X South Built. These are two teams. I'm gonna lay it out there. I am very unfamiliar with.
Yep.
Is there a favorite there?
Between those two, I'd say South Built personally. It can go either way. Like that's actually a very hard one to pick. Personally, I can't say I'd see either one actually winning out the qualifiers. But yeah, that one could go either way. Like they have very, very good players. It's more about, they're not very experienced. Like it doesn't seem like they really have a game plan, either of these two teams going into their matchups. Very high mechanically skilled players that they have in the team. So it's always a very kind of flashy show to watch when you watch either of these teams. But once you get into that, say, mid to late game, it does seem like they are lacking a bit of strategy. And it can be a bit of chaos. So I think against more experienced teams, these guys will probably end up kind of getting knocked out. But if I was to kind of pick between the two, I'd probably have a little bit more faith in South Build.
Okay. So I kind of the next jumping off point I want to go to is, so you have these three teams: TNC Predator, OB Esports Neon, Fnatic. Three teams that have made it to international events and have performed, I want to say, fairly decently. They have all come away with some DPC points. Fnatic may not have. Looking back, I'm trying to think if they did. But they've all these are players that have success in their records. What do you think it is that prevented them? Do you think it's just the format that prevented them from really making it in and not having to go through such a brutal qualifier?
Yeah, I'd say the DPC format kind of screwed SCA over because the format doesn't really suit the very competitive regions, right? Like the very close regions that end up having those close scores at the end of the season. It doesn't really favor them so much. And the fact that we had so many different teams going to both majors as well kind of also didn't help in a way, because we just couldn't rack up those DPC points in SCA to really at least get 2 slots going into TI and then have an extra one for the qualifiers. So yeah, we got a little bit screwed over, and I think the format didn't do us any favors in the SCA region for sure. But it's fine. I think they'll probably change it after TI's over anyway. I hope so anyway.
And it makes for, at least it makes for a hype qualifier. A bittersweet qualifier for sure, because only one of these teams is going to make it. So I want to move on to kind of some of the players, some of the stories here. Is there a player that you think could really make a breakout performance and really be the star of the show in the qualifier? If you had to go out on a limb, because you mentioned Motivate Trust Gaming, and when you were talking about them, you did mention that you think when they work as a team, that's when they look scary. Is there someone on the team that really stands out to you though?
Yeah, it's Jackie, 100%. Jackie, he's their position 1 player, ranked number 1 in SCA in terms of MMR, has been for a long time now. Every game you watch, so Motivate Trust, we always say it during our cast, but they're the kings of comeback. They can always rely on Jackie to just somehow, with the tiniest of map space, be able to catch up in net worth and carry the game for them, no matter how far behind they are. And so you'll notice Motivate Trust when you do watch them, they tend to run a very similar strategy every time, where the other 4 players, they'll just make space for Jackie. And they'll just trust that, 30, 40 minutes in, he's going to be just way too far ahead to be able to contest. And he's also quite clever with his decision making. Like he'll generally always make the perfect decision as to whether he needs to join a fight early, whether he needs to just stay out of an early fight and just keep farming. You'll notice his kiting is also very good, and he'll know when to man fight if he needs to man fight. So he is probably the scariest position 1 to go into right now, I would say. And I think if international teams are watching, I think he'll be the player that really stands out to them. In fact, before DPC even started, I think there were stats being compared, and he had like top 3 GPM in the world or something compared to other carries. So he's kind of ridiculous, this guy. He's a very talented position 1. Very talented.
And SEA, a famously poached region. So yeah, I think that's definitely a point to be made there. And kind of moving on with players as well. This is kind of maybe a personal opinion, but I want to talk a little bit about Fnatic and putting DJ on 5. I'm curious, as someone who has watched a lot of the region, is this I guess I'm just going to be blunt with it. Is this as bad as it seems? Because when I think DJ, I think 4 position. I'm thinking winning Shanghai Major, putting the team on his back. That's the DJ I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking of 5 position. And admittedly, I haven't watched enough of their performances to really make a judgment on that. But I'm curious what you think.
As much as it pains me to say it, I believe it's a pretty bad decision. I think DJ is that position forward that you talked about. That's kind of what we know him for. I've watched a lot of Fnatic in the DPC with DJ in the 5 position, and he just doesn't look as good. Like he doesn't have that impact, right? Like as a 4, you could kind of rely on him to make the big plays if you needed to, and do what he needed to do. But as a 5, he kind of just looks a little bit lost, in my opinion, compared to what he looked like in the 4 role. And you know, a really good pos 5, they'll still be able to have that massive kind of impact in the game if they need to. But I just don't see him as one of those position 5s, and I think Fnatic's in a pretty tough situation because they've got Jabs who wants to be playing position 4, but he originally played position 5 for the team, and he was very good at that role. But he's also extremely good at position 4, and that's what he wants to play. So Fnatic are kind of in this weird kind of scenario where if they don't give Jabs 4, the likelihood is he's probably going to be unhappy and not really perform and eventually leave. But then you've got another pos 4 that's called, you know, by the name of DJ that's also very good at his job. So they're in a pretty awkward position, I think, Fnatic.
Well, let me ask a question real quick. So I know that obviously DJ moving to 5 isn't ideal, but him being the captain of the team, often it's said that sort of captains being played in the 5 position, it's a lot easier for them to sort of make calls, control the team, because obviously 5 is a little bit less of a, you know, technically intense position. I was going to ask, have you sort of noticed any difference there in terms of, I know it's probably quite hard to see, but I guess it's more of a theoretical question. Do you think that while it's not so good for DJ as a player to be playing 5, it's actually better for Fnatic as a team to have this captain that is playing 5 and able to make sort of more macro level decisions with not having to worry so much about his own game?
I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I mean, it definitely needs to be that way. Like you can't really captain from any other role, especially in this region. I think it's just way too fast paced for a position 4 to have to captain the team. I think if I remember correctly, and I could be completely wrong here, but I believe Jabs, when he was playing 5, was captaining the team. So it looks like they just kind of switched it up based on who's playing the 5 role. But yeah, I think it is necessary that position 5s do take that role because the pace at which these guys play in the region is just way too quick. So you can't, for a 4, you have too much work to do. There's not enough time to look around the map and make decisions for everyone. So I would agree with you in that the 5 needs to be the captain and the captain needs to be the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will echo that sentiment. And kind of in that same line, we talked about this when we talked about South America. We talked about the idea of like SEA seems like a region that has a lot of good players, a lot of very talented players, but I'm unfamiliar with. I think the world. I think a lot of the world is too. With who are the real leaders in the region? Everyone kind of goes to Mushi as like a big example, like a prime example, but I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this question. Which leaders really stand out to you on some of these teams? People who can really inspire their team to maybe pull out something here, or in this high pressure scenario, carry them through.
So I'd say number 1 in this qualifier in particular, I'd say OB Neon's CTM, aka Skem, for anyone that kind of remembers him as that. I'd say he's one of the best leaders right now that's come out of SEA in the past 6 months to a year. Seems to lead the team very well. Seems very confident. Amazing player as well. Pretty much has played every single role that you can imagine in Dota. So I'd say he's a big one. And apart from that, I'd say Leonak is a pretty good leader, but he's not known for it yet. But you can kind of tell the way that you speak to him. He's a very confident man. He believes and instills the trust in the team, and motivate. They they have talked about a couple of their players. They do tend to tilt a little bit depending on how the game's going. So
Mhm.
Leonak's kind of the guy that calms them down a little bit and just kind of gets them back to what they were doing. And I suppose the biggest one outside of the qualifiers naturally Cuckoo from T1. Uh,
Yeah.
he's known right now as to being the best leader in SCA, just purely based off results. But I'm sure if you've watched any of the T1 games, you'll notice the team's very happy. They're always kind of laughing and memeing around and just being silly. But I think that's what teams in SCA really need when they go to big things like majors, because they do tend to get a little bit nervous and kind of get starstruck by, say, the EU teams or like EG from NA. They get starstruck by the players they're kind of playing against. So I think Cuckoo is one of the best captains in the C region right now because he kind of just calms the team down and puts them in a very kind of happy environment. And you never really see T1 angry. So he's very
Mhm.
good at keeping everyone, in the
Mhm.
right kind of frame of mind to play the game at its best.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of speaks to what makes C Dota, what makes it so scary on the world stage, is that when the teams are playing relaxed, when they're feeling themselves, they look unstoppable.
Yeah.
And they look like they're playing a version of Dota that you're not on yet. Like they look like they're playing the next patch or something like that because they're just playing so quick and they're not afraid to even in patches like this, which are really like fighting focused. They're not afraid to pick these like carries that'll just farm, and it is similar to South America a little bit. Where they'll have a carry, they'll pick a carry that'll just like look like this is going to be a carry that just sits away and farms the entire game and then comes out. But that carry will be there the entire time, playing with their team, playing fast and playing in your face.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so exciting. So I guess we'll round it off with we kind of already hit on it a little bit, but your final prediction, and we'll go through everybody here. Everyone's final prediction for who we think is going to take the whole thing. Benji, let's start with you.
Oh, it's tough. It's very tough. So I originally in my Dota qualifiers thing, I had a real outside in Boom Esports, but I don't know. I feel like you could pick a lot of these teams, and it would be a good. Yeah, people would say, yeah, that's kind of likely. I think I'll go with TNC. Um, I just feel like Tim's has been one of my favorite players, probably of all time. I just love the way he plays. Obviously, seeing him on the international stage a lot, but I think this whole roster's been really consistently good over the two DPC seasons. I think it's unfortunate that they weren't able to make it to on a points basis, but I'm hoping that they'll be able to perform in these qualifiers, and I think that their sort of experience as a team together. I think also bringing in Bok and Boomy to have the whole team speaking Tagalog. I think that's helped them a lot as we saw at the most recent major. So I'm going with TNC, but there are so many teams that could win this. I'm just so excited to watch it.
Mm-hmm. MLP, on to your prediction.
Yeah, I mean, before I go on, I'd like to say Benji's prediction's pretty good. That would be my second choice for sure for TNC Predator, but my choice is going to be Motivate Trust. Uh, it could go any way, but I think this team is probably going to repeat what they did back in the day and just kind of beat everyone out like they used to all the time. In fact, I might add, after they came first in the lower division, I did an interview with them, and they said they didn't care about going to the upper division. They just wanted TI. So even throughout the lower division, they were already focusing on the TI qualifiers, and they seem very confident to be able to take it out. So I'm going to go with Motivate Trust.
All right, we got one for Motivate Trust, one for TNC Predator. I guess I'll break the tie here. And I know I have Team SMG on my like Dota thing, but that's like an outside pick. I am gonna echo Benji here and go with TNC Predator. I think the experience is going to help them immensely, because this qualifier as you've mentioned, none of these teams want to lose against each other. This is going to be an incredibly high stress, high pressure qualifier. And I'm hoping that their experience, both on the world stage but in SEA for a long time, is going to help them out here. So yeah, we're 2v1, 2 for TNC, 1 for Motivate Trust, and it's crazy that we're nobody here has said either Neon or Fnatic.
Yeah.
But that's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, SEA qualifiers, they're going to be starting by the time this episode goes out. They'll be starting in like 12 hours or something like that. So yeah, watch them. It's going to be really exciting. Thank you to MLP Dota for hopping on and helping us out with the SEA qualifiers. His knowledge was actually very helpful in kind of rounding out what we can expect here. So thank you, MLP.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll come back with the NA qualifiers. And we're back. It's me, Benji, and special guest, MLP Dota, here again. We're going to be talking about NA qualifiers this time, which, as everyone knows, is going to be the best qualifier by a mile. So we'll jump right into it. Kind of the story here is that you have two teams, EG and Quincy Crew, who have both qualified for TI, and below them, many are saying, wrongly so, that there are no other teams in NA that are of that caliber. Just a blatant lie, talking out of their ass every step of the way. There's plenty of teams here, and we're going to talk about them. So let's kick it right off. We did it for SEA. We'll do it here in this upper bracket. 3 teams that you think could make it through. Benji, let's start with you.
Okay, so I think the obvious sort of favorite for this one has got to be Undying. Obviously, I think they've showed flashes of being sort of that top tier of NA, because you have EG and Quincy who've sort of separated themselves from the rest of the pack, and at times it's felt like you could put Undying in there. Like, they've had some really good performances, but also they've had times where they haven't quite performed. They haven't quite sort of found the results against EG and Quincy that you sort of need to put yourselves on a level with those guys. But I would say that they are definitely the favourites. Full Zoomers, I would then put as a sort of tier below them. They were a team that were very... I know they were sort of the second team behind Quincy in the long period where we just had sort of online stuff during 2020. Sometimes they would, take a game or two off Quincy, and I think they even beat them a couple of times. But they have been probably quite disappointing, or they will be quite disappointed in how they performed in DPC. I think they were also, with Undying, looking to put themselves up there with EG and Quincy, and they haven't quite found the results. And actually, they have not even looked like sort of the 4th best team in NA at some points. And then you have Simply 2 Base, which is this team that came through Division 2 Open Qualifiers, crushed Season 1, and now is in a very good position in the the regional qualifiers for TI. Obviously led by Monkeys Forever, who's been around for ages. They have made a roster change, bringing 5 up to play 4 position. But yeah, those are probably my top 3. Probably in that order, to be honest. Undying, Full Zoomers, and 2-Based. MLP, what are your thoughts on those sort of 3 teams, and sort of where you would rank them amongst each other?
We have very, very similar predictions for the top 3 in the upper bracket. I'd say Undying, Zoomers, and I'm a big fan of Simply 2-Based. I really am, but they haven't looked as strong as they did in Season 1. Now, naturally, they were in the upper division for Season 2, so it makes enough sense. My 3rd team was actually going to be D2 Hustlers. And I know they're coming out of nowhere from the lower division, but they've been looking really darn solid. And I guess there's a bit of bias here, because I was just speaking to 1437 the other 2 days ago. And he sounded very relaxed but very confident. So I maybe I'm kind of talking out of my ass here, but I'm gonna switch up Simply 2-Base for D2 Hustlers on this one. I think just the way I saw them throughout the Season 2 and how confident Their 1437 sounded when I was speaking to him. I think they might surprise some people going into these qualifiers. I'm very excited to see them as well.
It's interesting you should say that. I don't even have D2 Hustlers in my top 3, but I'm glad someone does, because this team in the lower division was just, I mean, you want to say they came out of nowhere, but they really didn't. When you look at the roster, they had that perfect mix of old and new blood that can carry a team like that. And they weren't. It didn't even look like they were trying, really. I mean, I'm sure they were, but they were picking like DK4, like they were playing all over the place. I mean, I think if they can keep that attitude, they definitely have a shot. And I think that's something that's gonna, because when I think NA teams, I think of pressure and crumbling under pressure. And if you can maintain a cool head through a qualifier like this, that's gonna help you immensely. But my 3 are, and this is gonna be like crazy controversial. But I have 4 Zoomers, Undying, maybe not crazy controversial now that I think about it, and Sad Boys. Because he's an off-kilter character. Some hate him, some love him. My opinions on him are unknown to everybody, but he is a factor. You have to look at this and you have to say, this man has never not qualified for a TI that he has tried to qualify for. He will pull something out of the bag. I think he's got a shot. On the topic of Undying, I do think they have a pretty good shot. This is, Benji said, the team that looks like they could be in the upper echelon of NA. I think their biggest problem is they have 2 players who go from looking amazing to looking like they're running around with a chicken with their head cut off, in Tomato and Moon Meander. Moon Meander, when he's looking good, he looks like a crazy good 4. He looks scary. But when he can't get that like early momentum and start getting those early ganks, he just starts running all over the map, looking for just anything. And then Tomato, when you put him on like a good hero and he has a good performance, he looks like the best carry in NA. However, another one of those players where if he falls behind, I think it's both the nature of him as a player, but also I don't want to put too much on him. Also, kind of the nature of the team doesn't really give him the space to kind of come back from that kind of start. But I think they're the best team mechanically here, looking at it in that way. And then for Zoomers, I think they kind of have this anime storyline where they lose to Undying Season 1, and then BTS Pro Series, they take them out in the grand finals. And you're like, whoa, what the hell? Then Season 2 rolls around, they lose a game to Black and Yellow, they lose their game to Undying, they're not looking so good. And then BTS Pro Series rolls around again, and there they are in the grand finals against Undying, and they lose. So I think that sets them up as kind of the anime protagonists of the NA qualifiers right now.
Do you see that as a potential upper bracket final matchup, the Undying versus 4 Zoomers? Or could you see maybe a I know you like to talk about the EE factor a lot. Could you see that being a potential upset to either of these teams? Or do you see those as maybe the 2 most likely to make it sort of through the upper bracket to that point?
That's a good question. I think if Sad Boys were going to upset a team, I do think it would be Undying. I feel like that's the envy way, is to upset the favorite of the tournament and maybe lose a game later on to like Simply 2-based or something. So I think that would set it up. If it panned out like that, it would set it up for an easy 4 Zoomers Undying qualifier. Because 4 Zoomers versus D2 Hustlers is probably their closest match early on. But yeah, MLP, I want to talk about Arkosh Gaming for a second, who has picked up
boys.
Aoi 2000. Do you think this is a net gain for the team? Do you think this could really maybe not a net gain, because I don't want to rip on the GOAT too much. I mean, he had his performances. He certainly did. Guy is one of the best clockworks I've seen.
Yeah.
But is this a net positive? Does this give them a little bit more of a chance coming into the qualifiers, do you think?
I think so. Like, as long as they've actually scrimmed together for a bit of time now and actually kind of, gelled, I think it is going to be a pretty big positive. I mean, this is a TI winner we're talking about, right? And AUI, I've spoken to him many times. He's a very clever man. Like, he's very humble, but he is very, very smart when it comes to Dota 2. So I think Arkosh, a lot of the problems that I used to see throughout Season 1 and even Season 2 was the fact that you just didn't have a captain that not so much didn't know what they were doing, but when things got hectic or the matchup was really tough, you wanted a bit more from them. And I think AUI is going to be that kind of guy that jumps in and really just can give a decisive kind of decision as to what needs to be done at that particular moment. And I think obviously he's pretty clever, right? Like he's going to draft very, very different, I think, to what we're used to seeing from Arkosh. So you're probably going to have a bit of that surprise element as well coming out from Arkosh now, where you think you know what they're going to choose and what they're going to draft, but it may be completely different. Overall, I think it's just all about how much time they've put in to try and practice and really be able to coordinate together before these qualifiers started, which, I mean, in all fairness, AUI has been doing some talent work in South America. So, it's questionable how much they've played together at this point, but I think it's going to be a good thing that he's joined the team for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And you kind of touched on something that I kind of want to bring up here is I think more so than any other region, the disparity in the general meta between the lower division and the upper division in NA is huge. Lower division, you had people playing. I remember you had Ray Lalisa was playing and pulling out TA before the major happened and before anybody really realized that this hero was crazy. So I think if there's a team that could benefit from coming to the qualifiers with some big ideas and maybe some AUI 5-head strategies, I think that'll help them out a lot. Do you think? I'll be bereft if I didn't mention my boys at the cut. Is there any hope? Is there an inkling of a chance? They did drop Lil Nick, and they did drop. Didn't they drop Vol? It looks like Vol's still on.
No, Vol playing. I was on the roster.
He's still there.
I can look at it. Tingle King.
Yeah, they dropped Tingle. Yes, okay. Yeah, they picked up Frogos. Yeah.
The mercenary Frogos.
Yeah. So Vol is still on the team. So yeah, I mean, if I could just give my quick opinion, I don't think this is a good decision. I don't think this is what they needed coming into the qualifier, but it's possible they saw their results and were like, hey, this ain't working. We need to do literally anything to scrape out a win. But yeah, I certainly don't think it's a benefit.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
Oh, please go on.
Okay, yeah. So it doesn't seem like it. I liked their roster beforehand. I thought they potentially had a chance to do something, but with these changes, I just don't. I mean, I don't know much about Rusi. Frugos, I would say, is in the nicest terms, replacement level is how I would sort of describe him. And I think going up against Undying is obviously, I think that's even like a 90-10 matchup for Undying. I think that one's going to be very difficult to see the cut even taking a game. And then you've got to play against Dogchamp, who for most of Season 2 were kind of the juggernauts of the lower division. I mean, this team was just running over teams. It seemed like they were going to go 7-0. Obviously, didn't quite pan out like that towards the end of the season. But I can definitely see the cut dropping out of the qualifiers without even picking up a game, which is sad, but that's how I see it panning out.
I'd have to agree. I think I think to answer your initial question, I think the changes were, in my opinion, pretty bad. I personally think Lil Nick has a lot of potential.
Hmm.
I've been saying it since season one. I think he's one of the better players that have kind of shown up. And I think, yeah, the changes. I mean, Tingle King, I thought he was pretty good too. I think the team was pretty good overall, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to insult the new players coming to the cut. Like, I don't know much about Rusi. I've honestly never heard of the guy, to be perfectly honest with you. So I don't want to comment on him because I haven't seen enough Dota from him. But I thought the cut was on the right path. I mean, maybe season two didn't really go their way, but I thought maybe they could just stick together. They could work it out. They could get some practice in, and maybe improve and come back better for the next season. But I don't know. They kind of just switched things up ASAP for TI qualifiers, which I guess there's some pressure because every team wants to qualify for TI, but. I don't know. I would say they're probably going to be fighting to not be last place, if I'm perfectly honest. So I don't have any confidence in the cut right now. As much as it pains me to say that.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. Rusi, the only real intel I have on him, he was on the typical NA, which was the stack. I believe he's on typical NA, which is the stack everyone thought was going to make it through NA Opens last season. Until D2 Hustlers showed up and Picado showed up and really just took everyone by surprise. We still might see, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this, the Vol tactical feed. I've only ever mentioned it in Twitch chat. This man will go up in lane and get like a killing spree, right? He will get 3 kills. I've seen him do it twice, and I don't think it's intentional, but I have to believe. He will get 3 kills, then he will go over to where the hard camp is being pulled and just get killed by their 5, the other team's 5, so that the 5 gets that gold bounty, and then he doesn't have to worry about feeding anymore. It's a brilliant strategy. More teams need to pull it off. It's won them 2 games. I have to believe intentionally, although probably unintentionally. Just because I've seen him do that and then immediately get killed by the one position immediately after, and the one position doesn't get that higher gold bounty. So he's still feeding to the other team, but it's not as extreme.
Yeah.
Some real NA strats. Some rat strats. So I guess we'll move on to the lower division now. Which, just looking at it at first glance, in my opinion, seems like all these teams have to go up against a pretty hard matchup. Dogchamp is probably going to have to go up against the Cut immediately, which is a matchup that I'm very excited for, simply because I think Dogchamp may have been the better team in Season 1, but couldn't win it out versus the Cut. But now I think it's even more apparent that Dogchamp is the team, is that better team. And then 5-man Midas has to go up against 2-based Hustlers. 5-man Midas, a team that has not looked very good. People had high hopes for them coming into Season 2. And they just did not look like they had what it takes. They picked up DNM, who I kind of hyped up coming into the season. I was like, this guy's going to do stuff. He certainly made Sad Boys look better than they were in Season 2. But they just couldn't hack it. And then you have Felt, a team who I think also made some roster changes coming in. Yellow Flash is on the team now, and they have a new 5 who I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Koyaniskasi. You got it?
Koyaanisqatsi. Yeah, Koyaanisqatsi. It's he named himself after a movie, apparently.
Oh, is it possibly a Japanese animation?
I think it's a French movie. John was telling me about it. Apparently it's one of those really kind of small films that you see at those film festivals. I haven't watched it personally. John has. He thinks it's a great film. I don't know anything about it. I just know how to pronounce the man's name. That's all I know.
Yeah, it looks like a bit of a cult classic, I would say.
Well, I mean, you get some points for that. I mean, I'll give them, maybe that bumps them up a little bit, but they have to go up against either Arkosh or 4 Zoomers. Arkosh historically has, I think, beaten them every time.
I got that number for sure.
Yeah. Although the one time they beat them, Felt did have their one position disconnect in a game that they looked like they were winning. And the other game was actually pretty close as well in Season 2. So that matchup could actually be pretty close. But I would still have Arkosh going through there. So yeah, we kind of touched on Team Dogchamp before we started the pod. But this was a team that I think in Season 2, everyone really thought this was their time. They were going to make stuff happen. They've got a lot of up-and-coming players who look very, very good. MLP, you even mentioned that they are a stacked roster between Bloody Nine, Luki, Rayla Lisa. What do you think their chances of making a run here are?
Pretty good. I mean, I'm looking at the bracket right now. So predictions, I think we can all agree the Cut will lose to Undying. I think that we could all predict that, right? So they'll have to go up against the Cut first, which I think, quite frankly, they're going to win if they go up against the Cut, in my opinion. So in terms of a run, here's the thing. I'm always a sucker for the psychological kind of the psychological game here, and I think Dogchamp, they've stuck with each other through thick and thin. I think, they've gained a lot of confidence as these 2 seasons have gone by, and maybe it's a bit of confirmation bias because I've watched them and casted them so many times, but I think their chances are pretty good, to be honest. Maybe once they go up against the harder teams that are from the Division 1, maybe it kind of changes, but I think they should be able to at least get through a few rounds before they get knocked out. If not, they might go all the way. I'd have a little bit of faith in them, personally.
Yeah, this was a team that beat Undying in BTS Pro Series. Yeah, they took a game off of a top team right there. And I do got to give them props, not making it up to Upper Division 2 seasons in a row. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they only had one roster shuffle.
I think they had some complications with their one position because they had Fade, and I know at a time they had who was the other one? Oh, I can't remember his name. They did have another one position, but yeah. So, but largely this team has remained the same pretty much.
Which I gotta give them props, especially after what happened to them at the end of Season 2, with kind of the Twitter gate. Luki going off on Twitter and then getting owned, as the kids say, by 1437. So to stick it out through that, I mean, I think if they're a team that could make a run, I personally, for whatever reason, let's say they make it to grand finals, this isn't a team I could see taking a best of 5. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I think in a best of 5 situation, any of the other teams I think that they would be up against would be able to beat them out. Maybe not on pure talent, but on mental game and like draft, because I feel like that has been kind of their biggest downfall as a team, has been their drafts. Which it sounds weird because especially in Season 2, they look like a team. It's like at the beginning of the season, who do you ban versus this team? Because they have so many specialists on their team. But as soon as it got to the end of the season and they started to go up against a team that actually had some real talent, it became apparent that that wasn't as big of a threat as people really made it out to be. I still think that threat is there, but I don't think that's something they can necessarily fall back on as much.
Yeah, because I think at the start of the season when they were sort of running through teams, I actually sent you a message and I said, what 2 heroes do you ban against Dogchamp first phase? Because you have techies that you don't want to play against. You want to play against Ray Lisa's Storm. If you ban those 2 heroes, you let Luki get Mars or Pango, which is like, he can win the game with those heroes just on his own. So, as you said, it wasn't something that teams started to sort of figure out how to draft against it, and it didn't become that much of a problem as the season went on. But it's the kind of thing that when you're making a lower bracket run, it's the kind of thing that can really be useful to have these heroes that you can just that people either don't want to play against, so that you get, they have to ban it first phase, so you get a free sort of first phase ban, um, or just a last pick that can win you any game.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that sentiment. Like, I think the main weakness of DogChamp was always I wouldn't even say it's the whole team, right? Like, it's usually Ray Lisa and Lukey Lukey that kind of have what we like to call maybe the hero puddle, right? It's not so much of a pool, but there's those 2 or 3 heroes that they really excel on that if you give them, they're probably going to beat you. Ray Lisa Storm, like you mentioned, but you've also got the TA, very, very strong on that. Lukey Lukey is the Pango Mars. Mostly the Mars, I think, from what I was seeing most recently, because he keeps telling me Pango's weak right now, so he doesn't really seem to enjoy that. Now, the one thing I will add, I think DogChamp has the most versatile 5 player in Bloody Nine. That guy is just, it's really hard to understand how he does it, but he chooses those position 5 pucks and weird things like that you wouldn't expect, and it always catches teams off guard. It's always a pleasure to watch. So I think they do have that bit of versatility in Bloody Nine, and even with the limited hero pool that we were just talking about with Lukey Lukey and Raider Lisa, I think if they've taken the time to try and increase that hero pool and really specialize in other heroes before this qualifier starts, I think the teams they're going to go up against are going to assume that they've got to be worried about the Storm or the TA or the Mars or the Pango. But what happens if they've suddenly been practicing another hero in the past 2 months? You're not going to be expecting it, and then it'll fly out, and then they might just stomp you with it. It's hard to know, right? And we're in one of those weird metas where you've got Broodmother in, and you've got all these kind of cheesier illusion heroes that are being played. So it's one. If they've done the practice and they've scrimmed a lot and they've actively tried to increase their hero pool over the past couple months, I think they're going to be one of the scary teams to go up against, because you're really going to have no idea what to expect, and they're always going to have those other heroes to rely on. Like, you can always go back to the Storm or the Mars, because teams are just not going to be able to know what to really ban out. So I hope for their sake that they've tried to increase those hero pools on their 2 and 3 position, because those positions are too important to only have 2 or 3 heroes that you can play in each one.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want this to go on too long, so I guess we'll kind of move it on to our final prediction for the NA qualifier. Benji, let's start with you. Who you got?
So, I think I'm gonna have to go with. I know it's kind of the boring pick, but Undying. I don't know. I feel like this qualifies kind of open. Like, I could see a few teams winning it, but I think I'm going to have to go with the team that's been sort of the most consistent over the 2 TBC seasons. Also, they're just coming off a win in the BTS Pro Series, and I think momentum is pretty important in these qualifiers. I wouldn't say it's massively important. I think momentum is kind of a thing that gets overhyped by people like us who aren't actually playing on the teams. But I think this team is pretty consistent. You talked about sort of Tomato and Mumianda not being being quite hit and miss players, but I think they'll be able to put it all together. And just on top of everything, I just think they're the strongest team in this field. So I'm going to have to go with Undying in this qualifier.
Alrighty, 1 for Undying. MLP, moving on to you.
Hate to be boring, but I kind of agree with Benji here. I mean, that's the team I've predicted in the game. I think Undying will probably clean up. Maybe we'll have the Undying for Zuma's grand final, but Undying looks very strong, and I think they would have scrimmed quite a bit and really been prepared for these qualifiers, considering how the DPC went. So, yeah, Undying it's gonna have to be.
Well, okay. Given that we got 2 for Undying, let me kind of set this up.
You're gonna say
in a very anime way, in the style of Japanese cartoons. Let's say Undying. I think they're your 13 episode season arc. They're the hot boys. They're gonna come through. They're gonna make stuff happen. And I'm basing this off of the 3 teams we really touched on. For Zoomers, who's the other team I have in my top 3. I think they're like the slice of life anime. they're the four guys hanging out, having a good time, and then you have Sammy Boy tryharding really hard, and he'll carry them even if it seems like they don't really care that much. And then Dogchamp, I think that's the shonen anime. This isn't their time, but you know what? Next year or the year after or the year after, eventually it will be their time. And I'm leaving Sad Boys out of the equation. It pains me to say it, but I just I can't. I just can't give it to them. So I will agree. It is the 13 season. I mean, it's the 13 episode Undying arc. The first half of the season is them not quite making it to these majors. The second half of the season is them qualifying for TI and winning the entire thing.
Okay. That's it. Sure, why not?
So that's three for Undying.
Yeah.
I am really looking forward to this qualifier, though. I think it's going to be super interesting. And I think there's a lot of upset potential.
Yeah.
Especially we talked about Dogchamp. I could see. I mean, you had in Eastern Europe, you had Team Empire making a run all the way through the lower bracket and being one game away from the grand final. So it can happen. It's not a death sentence to be placed in the lower bracket. But yeah, really looking forward to the qualifiers. It should be very fun to watch.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think NA is a region where they will always play their own meta, no matter what, even if it's bad. They will just keep doing it, and then they'll show up to the major and play something different. That's one of my favorite things about NA. So yeah, I think the picks especially are it's gonna be very interesting to see in that perspective. MLP, any closing thoughts on NA?
I think, my closing thought on NA is I think it's going to be a very exciting qualifier, and most people like to say NA is very top heavy with your EG and your Quincy crew, but I think it's getting much closer. I think teams are developing quite quickly in the region, and quite frankly, I'd say apart from Southeast Asia, I'd say NA is probably my second most exciting region to watch. And that's not me being biased because I got to cast 2 seasons of the NADPC. These teams are really good and there's a lot of potential coming out of the region. I think what it just needed is a bit of support, which the DPC is now providing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited. I think even though we all predicted Undying, I think you had some very precise kind of thoughts there as to, any team being able to take it on any given day. It could go any way. So I think it's one of those qualifiers that you need to watch. And yeah, I hope we're surprised, to be honest. I mean, I know we all predicted the same team, but I mean, why the hell not have some kind of wild card go into TI? Why not?
Yeah. I think it's, if there was ever a year for it, it's this year. So yeah. That's going to do it for this episode of Aegis and Cheese. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to MLP Dota for hopping on and helping us out with this.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next time. We'll see you next week. We're going to go over China, and we're going to go over another spicy qualifier in Western Europe, so stay tuned for that.